If I let go of my predetermined goal, I don't know what's going to happen. And that's exciting because you don't know. That's the essence of adventure. Welcome to Catch the Zenith, the podcast where I talk about high performance and business. My name is Nicola and I currently work in software sales. Today we've got another episode of Zenith Reflections, which is a format where I reflect upon my week. I talk about stuff I could do better, things I'm perhaps doing well. I share some ideas I had. I try to articulate stuff that's on my mind and I'm maybe not yet capable of articulating them. So it's my attempt of doing that here. And I also share some lessons from the week, but also from the weeks, months, and maybe even years before that I remembered. Today I want to discuss two things. And the first thing is how to have an adventure. So let's start with that. Tim Ferriss, you may have heard of. He's the author of the great book, The 4-Hour Work Week, and hosting the podcast show, The Tim Ferriss Show, or the podcast. And he has this idea of the good shit sticks. Let me quickly explain. So let's do an example. You read a book or you heard a podcast and there's like one line that grabs you, one idea, one theme, and it won't leave you. And that's exactly how I felt when I heard the following idea of Jordan B. Peterson, Dr. Peterson, when he were on Huberman's podcast. And I want to share that in a second, but this idea of sometimes you listen to a podcast, you watch a YouTube video, you read a book, and there are so many different things within that corpus of a book or whatever it might be, whatever piece of content. And I was always wondering, what exactly should I remember from those content sources? And it's sometimes totally okay if it's just one core idea. It's actually good because you remember something. Because I remember back when I read a book, let's say we have 100% of things I could remember. Normally it's perhaps maybe 10%, maybe even less, 5%. But those 5% are super, super crucial because they're important to you. And I listen to many podcast episodes and sometimes I have maybe one input that really stuck with me over the years. Or when I listen to an interesting speaker like Peterson, there's one theme that really resonated. There's, for instance, the core theme of taking on responsibility if you want to have a meaningful and fulfilling life. And he expresses this idea over and over again with different words, but the core idea is the same. And that always remembers me, this is the major thing I should remember when thinking about Peterson, for instance. And I found that very useful, just focusing on what's the good thing here, what sticks, and everything else, yeah, that's also nice, but this one piece of information is important to you. And I had the same experience when listening to the episode of Dr. Jordan Peterson being on Huberman's podcast. Can highly recommend this episode. I think it was published in the beginning of this year, 2025. It's a long conversation and I found almost every single minute very, very valuable. And it stayed with me for over the past 5 months. And I want to read a quote from this episode, which entails the core of the lesson I've learned from that. Peterson said, "Truth is an adventure, because if you vow to follow the path of the truth, you have to let go of the predictability of the outcome." Right now, if I wanted to manipulate you in some way, I would craft my strategy for this podcast a priori, and then I would tilt the podcast toward that end. And I could be more or less sophisticated at that. Or I could just say, We are going to follow the thread wherever it goes. And I'm going to accept the outcome. And I'm going to presume that the outcome is the best outcome that could possibly have been, even if I don't see why. Okay, why is that an adventure? Because if I let go of my predetermined goal, I don't know what's going to happen. And that's exciting because you don't know. That's the essence of adventure. It's like you're bounding over the uncharted sea and you don't know what's going to happen next. Why would you exchange that for a kind of banal predictability? Well, to build your career, I understand why, but you're forgoing what's truly valuable for something that's second rate, for something that's secure. And that's what Abraham did. It's like, it's better to have the adventure. Why the hell wouldn't you want that? And I took that very one-to-one. This is the original quote, basically. I think almost I left no word away from that. So, and I kept coming back now to that core idea here, which is telling the truth, what you really think to be true, is an adventure. Because you don't know what's going to happen next. And that's exactly what I've been trying to do in my podcast, or I attempt to do that, to ask questions I'm actually genuinely interested in. So I say stuff that's on my mind that I truly want to explore. And also I'm not always do a perfect job at that, but I try to say or approximate to say what I truly think. And not what I think people want to hear from me or what questions that they found interesting. No, I try to ask the questions I found personally interesting. And I think some listeners might find it interesting as well, but I start with me with me first, if that makes sense. And telling the truth or what you think to be true or what you really think, it's sometimes very uncomfortable, I experience. You don't know the outcome, as Peterson said. And people might disagree, but it feels right. Because at least it's what I really think. And sometimes, quite frankly, sometimes I'm not even sure what exactly I think. I need to explore that. So it's sometimes saying something is an exploration. You try to approximate what you really think. Because you need to put the structure into your words, into your sentences, which is demanding and challenging. And I think this core message of Peterson, having an adventure, and you attain that by telling your truth, what you think to be true, that is also the key to authenticity. If we ascribe someone as authentic, I feel like they are more or less saying what they truly think. And Alex Hormozi has, quite a good definition of authenticity. He said, authenticity is how you behave when you have zero threat of punishment. It's when what you think, what you say, and what you do are the same. The problem is most people don't know what they think. They suck at communicating. That's what I was referring before a little bit. And they are afraid of getting into trouble. So let's quickly recap what he said. He's saying if we ascribe someone as authentic, they have three things. They combine three things. The first is they say what you really, truly, and even controversially believe. Second is then also what you say. So those things are aligned. And then third, your actions. What you do, they are also aligned with that. So let's do an example. If you think A, but you say B, but you do A, this is not necessarily aligned. So if what you believe is A, what you say is A, and what you do is A, that's authenticity. And he has another nice quote, which is more or less the same, where he said, "People are attracted to authenticity, but it's hard to define it. My attempt, true alignment of what you think, what you say, and what you do. The hardest part is realizing that our thoughts are fucked and that we have to fix them instead of faking the next two." All this to say that be it now authentic. You attain that by saying what you think, or at least that's what I currently think to be true. And at the same time, if you let go of any a priori agenda you have when going into a conversation, when going into any kind of endeavor, and you just accept that whatever outcome is there, that's the best outcome I could possibly achieve. And fair enough, you can prepare, obviously. You should prepare. But accepting the outcome as it is, I think, is an interesting thing to do, at least from my perspective. And now tying that to my personal podcast, my journey was a bit like this. I started my podcast. I was not very good at it, and I'm still far away from being very good at it. But I think I become a little bit better maybe after each episode. And I used to ask maybe on average a bit more questions that I already knew the answer to the question. And I just thought it's interesting to ask that question for the listeners. Sometimes I had maybe a question that I was genuinely interested in, but it was maybe a mix of that. And I had few weeks, maybe now even months ago, an episode together with one of my best friends, Milos Jovanovic. You can look up that episode. It's a cool episode, I think in the past 10 or something. I think the title is University Still Worth It? It was a 3.5 hour conversation. And that was, I think, more or less the first conversation on my podcast, or a conversation of the podcast I'm very proud of because I think I more or less consistently said what I think to be true. Maybe I did not always the perfect job, but it's something I can say, okay, I'm content with the outcome of that episode. And it felt pretty good when having that conversation because I didn't obey to any kind of agenda of the or thoughts of the other person in terms of that just because this person says that, I need to also think that is true. I recently had a conversation where someone put something in the room which was, I disagreed with, but I listened to it and I wanted to understand it. And it's always this line between like obeying and also then saying, yeah, I exactly think, yeah, that's exactly the right path to not offend the other person, or just listening and try, okay, what exactly do you mean by that? Tell me a little bit more. Give me an example. How so? And then you learn from the other person, and you not necessarily need to disagree or say something you not truly think. And of course, you can have a debate then about that. But I realized, quite frankly, in podcast settings, in general, if you talk to people and you let them articulate their ideas without directly jumping in or judging, they feel more comfortable expressing what they truly believe, and they share with you more information as opposed to if you challenge them right away. Give them a little bit space. And sometimes it's okay. Think what you think, and you just listen, and you think, does that make sense? Maybe, maybe not, and you put it away, and you don't listen to that, or you listen to that, and you learned something new. And all this to say that I'm not still there yet in terms of always saying what I think, because sometimes it's super, super scary because you don't want to offend other people. But I know now what the aim is. Like, you say what you think and you don't lie. And I see lying as a sin, and I define sin here, and I think that's actually really the right definition, if I remember correctly. which means missing the mark. That is sin. And you miss the mark if you lie, because the mark initially was you'd speak the truth, but you haven't told the truth. You lied, and then you missed the mark. So that's sin, and I want to avoid that. And sometimes it's really very, you don't even realize it. You say something, and then you reflect upon it and think like, do I really believe that? No, I don't think so. I just spoke a little bit too fast. The pace was too high. I maybe even let the other person who spoke very fast dictate my own pace, and I said something I don't wanted to say. Yeah, that can happen. So, all this to say, how to have an adventure. Don't lie. Tell the truth, or at least what you think to be true, what you really think. Second thing I want to discuss today is a lesson that changed how I work. Quick story. Back in 2023, or even 2022, I think it was in 2022, I had the kickoff days of the master's program I started at that time. It was called Master in General Management at the University of St. Gallen. I'm now still, I'm writing now, more or less my master thesis. And over a period of 2 days during those kickoff days, we had the opportunity to listen to smart minds from prestigious companies like Accenture, Boston Consulting Group, etc., many more. And one lesson from a fireside chat with a partner at Boston Consulting Group really stuck with me over the past 3-ish years. And the lesson was, in the work environment, make your work contribution visible and clear to everyone involved. Put simply, when you're working on a project, make sure the people working with you know what you did. And I want to be clear here, this doesn't mean you should report more what you've done than doing the actual work. It simply means precisely you're showing precisely what you have done to ensure the group as a whole is better off, so that nobody can come and claim that you haven't done anything. And to drive the point home, I will give you 3 personal examples how I exactly apply it, and then it should become maybe a little bit more clear. The first one is, during my master studies, I was involved in numerous group projects. And one thing I've tried in most cases is to clearly report my progress through proactive communication, WhatsApp, and meetings, and voluntary taking on responsibility, such as serving as the group work organizer. So I was scheduling the meetings, I was preparing the agenda items, I was taking on voluntarily responsibility. And people saw that, and it was implicitly also I made clear that I contribute to this group project, to this group work. And I tried in most cases to be proactive in my WhatsApp communication. Not always, there were some exceptions, and I had my reasons in those instances. But in most cases, I ask myself, especially I would say in the last exam semester, that was in 2024, it was spring semester, right? There, I locked myself up for this semester. I worked very hard because I just had not only that to do. In the previous 2 semesters, I had my business and stuff like that, so I needed to think always how to allocate my resources carefully. But long story short, I asked myself, how can I be the best possible group member? And then I asked myself, what would a very bad group member do? And a very bad group member would always be late on meetings, never respond to WhatsApp messages, promise to do something, but then not actually doing the things. And then I flipped that and I told myself, okay, be always on time, proactively communicate, do a little bit discretionary effort, prepare for the meetings, and always deliver on what you promised. And then the group work was quite pleasurable, at least from my side. It depends a little bit because there were some instances where other people were not contributing that much, which is also okay. It was a good learning, and it was an opportunity for me to work harder and to take on even more responsibility. So you can always see the positive in challenging situations. But all this to say that my contribution was visible. The second example is I picked up 5 weeks ago a new job or work at a Swiss B2B software startup. And my key goal there is I need to schedule 15 demos, which is a fancy word for a meeting with a potential customer per month. Because I work in sales as a setter or sales development representative. And what we are doing there is we have a weekly end of the week sales checkout meeting. And I report all the progress I've made during the week. So how many demos or meetings I've booked, additional stuff I've done beyond that, like updating maybe our sales playbook, lessons learned, lead lists I created, sequences for cold outreach I created, etc., etc. And I very much like that because it adds some pressure. You need to deliver during the week, and then you're looking forward to report at the end of the week what you've done. And I really somehow like that, to work hard during the week and then to celebrate all together at the end of the week. So again, it's the same approach. You do stuff and then you make sure that everybody knows what you've done. And the last example, and this is more if you're working in a corporate setting, I was working in the US for 6 months in Salt Lake City at a Swiss company. And I would have there a weekly, let's say, meeting with my boss, like a project progress meeting with the chief operating officer, COO. And I would always, in most cases, have that on Friday, I think in the morning or afternoon. And this added more pressure on me to work hard during the week because I knew, similar to the example before, I have a deadline on Friday. I know, then I'm reporting what I've done during the week. And I like having deadlines because this adds some pressure and you are doing stuff faster. I think Elon is famous talking about that. If it takes 30 days to clean up your room or house, it will take 30 days, but maybe you can do it in 30 hours or in 3 days. I think I didn't get the exact quote right, but that's the essence of it. Less time, sometimes better to get things done faster. And interestingly, my boss, the COO, very much loved that I reported at the end of the week what I've done. And it's also important how I reported. I not just only said stuff, what I've done, I actually created a PowerPoint presentation where for each project I was working on, and there were quite a bunch of, I think 5, 6, 7 sometimes at the same time, or I don't know, roughly. And I showed him precisely what I've done on each project. I included screenshots, emails I've sent, PowerPoints I created, etc. So he had a full PowerPoint presentation and I sent that to him upfront in a digital format, and I also printed it out and I personalized that PowerPoint presentation with his name. So not only did I make sure he knows what I'm doing during the week, but also, I think he felt important because I made an effort to personalize the PowerPoint, print it out, and so on and so forth. So that's the third example. Now you might ask, why am I doing this? Why should I report what I've done? Good question. I see 4 benefits. The first is knowing what I'm doing, I'm going to report, knowing what I'm going to report, what I've done, gives me pressure to work hard in the moment. So if I know I'm going to report in the end of the week, it adds a little incentive. You always remember, I don't want to not deliver on my promise at the end of the week. I don't want to admit that I haven't done what I promised I would do. Second, I take on more responsibility, and I want to be number 1 in the group and voluntarily take on more projects than I would otherwise do. Because knowing that I can transparently show what I've done creates positive reinforcements in me. Because in the end of the week, if you have a meeting with all your team members, with your boss, whatever, and they see and they are happy about it, in me it creates more reinforcement of that behavior. You get more of it. And that's an interesting dynamic, because if you want more of a behavior in another person, when this person does this behavior, you give them a praise. You say, hey, well done. Great, you've done that. And you get more of it, I think, in some cases. Not always, but from a psychological perspective, I think this works great, as opposed to using punishment. If you punish people, I think Peterson has this famous example. Let's imagine husband and wife, and the wife they're going out both Saturday evening, and the wife really makes an effort to look well. She puts on makeup, she wears a nice dress, etc. But somehow the husband is maybe a little bit jealous, and he's not very happy about it, and he tells her that, like, you look too beautiful, or he punishes her for making an effort to look good for him. And if he does that over and over again, or vice versa, at one point the woman not stops doing that, and maybe quite the opposite happens in terms of she don't want to take care of her or whatever. But it's a vicious cycle, because you're both each other then like punishing all the time with some microaggressions. I didn't exactly now say what I want to say. It's a little bit hard for me to articulate, but I think you get what I want to say. If you punish, in that case, the wife always, and I mean punishment with words, of course, then you get less of that, obviously. If you constantly punish, like, she makes an effort actually for you, but you say, like, why are you doing that? Other men will look at you. You get less of that. And I think that's not a very pleasurable existence if you live consistently in that setting, because there is always those microaggressions. But all this to say that if you want more of a behavior, point it out right now. And good leaders are doing a great job in very fast telling you if you did something well. So maybe you've sent, in a sales job, a good email to a client, and you get a message directly, hey, you CC'd me on that email, well written. And you get more of that in most cases. Or, hey, I just listened to your sales call. Hey, well done. You can change a little bit that, but it was a very good call. Again, you get more of that. Not generalizing here, but I saw that. I think that's what I think to be true. All right. And that was the second one. Third one is, if I get the work done, I act as a role model and set the bar higher. So if I know I report, I get the work done, I act as a role model and set the bar higher, because I do more. And setting the bar higher will likely motivate other members to work hard as well. And that's, I think, in most cases, the normal group dynamics. If the bar is very high and everybody works hard, there's no one who doesn't want to work hard, because they know it wouldn't be a pleasurable existence in that setting. But, and that's interesting, if you have only one person, I think one person can be enough. It can be like a bad apple, rotten apple. It can tear down everybody else. Everybody else does less, because if this person who's a rotten apple, if that's accepted, everybody else think, why should I work that hard, what I'm doing right now? Why am I working so hard? The other person's not working hard, and actually it's okay, as I see. It's like you get positive reinforcement for that, because your leader or other people accept it, and everybody else does less. But if you have everybody who have a very fast pace and have very high standards, everything else shifts upward. The bar is way higher. More work gets done. More projects people take on more projects, whatever. And that's cool. If you have everybody working hard, the dynamics are fantastic. Right now, for instance, in the startup I work, we started 3 new people started in the sales team, 2 SDRs, sales development representatives, and 1 account executive. And it's very cool because we push each other. And in general, also already the existing sales team, you get cool inputs from them, you learn from them, you get mentoring, and then you have the people you started with, and you push each other. Hey, today let's book another meeting. Let's book another meeting. Let's book another meeting. You push each other, and that's pretty cool if you have a high bar. And you want that, especially if you have the ambitions to have a high performance company, because if it's not like that, it's easy to do less and less and less. But if good enough is not good enough and you can always go further, I think that's really cool, because it also, at least in my case, it adds meaning. It gives an aim, it gives a target and something worth working for. The last one, the 4th point, is if the bar is high and everybody knows what the other person has contributed, it decreases the probability of having a free rider in the team. That's more or less what I already discussed, but it's interesting. If everybody is working hard, the incentive is clear. You also want to work hard. And especially, I think, at university, you sometimes had those free riders which did nothing. And I had one instance where I had actually multiple people in the team that they didn't have the same standards like I used to have there, and that's okay. I accept that, like every stoic. But and I needed to tell myself over and over again, I could either now complain about this fact that they are not really contributing, and one person actually didn't respond at all, or even sometimes 2 persons, or I could flip that and say, hey, it's a good challenge to see how can I get the entire work of a group project done myself. And I flipped it. And I need to consistently tell myself, think the ladder, think the ladder, think the ladder, because it doesn't really help you right now to complain about the first, because it impairs your ability to do the work right now or to do good work. It builds up resentment. It drains your energy levels, so you don't want that. All right. So when working in group settings, this lesson of making sure that other people know what you've contributed served me very well. And I think full transparency is the cornerstone of it. Clearly saying, that's what I've done, that's what I haven't done. And tying back to the first thing about how to have an adventure, again, the core there is also transparency, or being authentic, and you attain that by saying what you think. And it doesn't mean you need to unsolicitedly always tell what you think when the setting is not appropriate. You can also shut your mouth sometimes. And I'm speaking to myself here. It's totally fine to have no opinion about something, or to say, hey, I have an opinion, but I don't want to share it. I think that's something I sometimes saw myself, especially when I got back a little bit to consuming more political content. saying then something and talking about stuff I really haven't done a proper due diligence, and that doesn't serve me. And I saw also other people doing the same, I think, mistake, talking about stuff they haven't really thought through. And I still do that sometimes because it's pretty stimulating to talk about stuff, although you don't know entirely what's true, what's not true, for it. And fair enough, that's also an important aspect. You don't know stuff, so you talk about it and you maybe learn something for the other person or yourself learn something from you. But sometimes I feel like people should do a better due diligence, and I include myself here as well. Give you, for instance, give you an example. One person claimed that Joe Rogan is XYZ person. And then I ask, and I didn't really disagree or agreed with, I just was curious, how interesting. How did you come to that conclusion? I think I didn't say that. I asked then, how many podcasts of him have you listened to? And it turned out he had not listened to a single episode in its full entirety, like the entire episode. And then I was thinking, personally, I've listened to, don't know how many hours, maybe 50 hours, maybe more hours of Joe Rogan podcast, maybe less, but a lot of hours, let's put it like that. And then I thought, okay, now it doesn't matter if that's true or not, but maybe do a proper due diligence and then talk about stuff, not the other way around. Yeah, we went a little bit off the main theme, but I thought that's interesting or worth sharing. So let's do a quick rundown what we discussed today. We talked about how to have an adventure. The core here is you say what you think, you don't lie, you tell the truth or what you think to be true. Then we talked about a lesson that changed how I work. In other words, what the lesson is, when being in a group setting, make sure that people know what you've done, what you contributed. Okay, bye. Thanks for listening. And as a gift for staying this long here and listening to my beautiful voice, I've spent 4 months putting together a curated list of over 100 podcast episodes I enjoyed the most listening. And it entails my top 10 all-time favorite podcast episodes. It includes episodes on productivity, wealth, and relationships. And it's my best picks, which I listened over the past, I don't know how many years, and I hope you like it. Just click the link below. And when downloading this list, this PDF, you also get signed up to my newsletter as well. And you can enjoy every Sunday from a quick input from my side. Again, similar to this format here, and straight into your inbox. All right, thanks for listening. Have a good week. Bye.